Welcome to the best Vault Hardpoint guide on YouTube. My name is Pawn, and I'll be breaking down everything you need to know so that you can dominate on Vault. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more Black Ops 6 guides, strategies, and live streams. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start by taking a look at the overall structure of Vault. This is a pretty standard map that can be broken out into 5 zones. First, the spawn zones on each end of the map. These zones are where the primary spawns are located, and you will generally have total control of the zone that you spawn into. Next to the spawn zones are the transitional zones. If you want to keep the enemy team spawn trapped, you'll be looking for kills within these zones. Both P2 and P4 are located within these zones, with P4 being the easier to hold point. Finally, the mid zone, which holds the P1 and P3 zones. The team with a better positioning and communication will generally do better on these points, especially if you are able to spawn trap the enemy team. The defensive spawn is by far the easier to control spawn and can be extremely difficult to flip an enemy team out of. It's also the better spawn for P4, which is also the hardest hill to break and therefore the most important on the map. The offensive spawn does have P2 close by, but access is limited to the backdoor and side routes, all of which can be easily controlled from the defensive side. With all this considered, our approach will be to keep the defensive spawn throughout the match. If your team gets the offense spawn for P2, it can often be very difficult to get the defense spawn back for P3 and P4. From each spawn, there are 4 primary routes that can be taken through the transitional zone. To keep an enemy team spawn trapped, you'll want to stop them from crossing the mid zone, so it's important to have every crossing point covered. The defensive side of the map has more angles and positions that can be used to create a spawn trap while your team gets time. Holding down P1 is all about keeping the enemy stuck in their spawn and stopping them from entering the building completely. With a single player on time, the other 3 players can focus on cutting off all possible routes from the enemy spawn. Catwalk control is the most important area of the map to control here, so if this player goes down, you'll want to make sure this lane gets picked back up as soon as possible. If you're spawning on this side at the start of the game, it can be a very effective strategy to flank by using the outer and underground routes. Remember to use your equipment here, as it can be a very effective way to keep the enemy off P1 time without even taking a gunfight. Make sure that if you successfully break the hill and flip spawns, you have catwalk and mid-cut control before getting on time. As we discussed earlier, we will not be obtaining the closer spawn for P2. As you can see in the setup, there's several line of sights that can be used to keep P2 control from the defensive spawn. In an ideal scenario, 2 players can provide covering fire while another player soaks on time. With that being said, don't worry too much if your team isn't getting time here. It's far more important that we keep the defensive spawn for P3 and P4, so prioritize using these power positions to keep the enemy off P2. Because most teams that are not following our guide will actually want this spawn, it can actually be pretty easy to flip. Take advantage of the minimal pressure on the P3 side of the map to get the defensive spawn, and then proceed to set up in the positions we just discussed. Focusing on getting the defensive spawn during P2 is very important. Getting out of this spawn during P3 or P4 can be almost impossible and can lose your team a lot of time. Our P3 setup is not too different from our P1 setup. With 1 player on time, the other players can focus on keeping the enemy stuck in their spawn. 1 player in the art building and another player on P1 can work together to keep the player on time safe. Another player should be positioning catwalk to ensure the enemy team doesn't make a push towards P4 down this side of the map. If you still don't have the defensive spawn, it is now extremely important that you focus on getting it. 1 player can utilize either outer lane to make a push towards the enemy buildings. Any player who is able to cross into the enemy spawn zone should stay alive at all costs. While making your way across the map, use the various headies and lines of sights to keep the enemy off P3 time. There's a very large open area that must be crossed before the enemy can contest the point, which makes this point very easy to hold with good positioning. Having a player in the top of each building while another player has catwalk control can be extremely effective. If you are able to get this spawn right away, you can oftentimes get 100% of the time here. An effective strategy to breaking this point can be to have 3 players apply pressure directly towards the point, while another player, ideally an AR, sneaks along the outer route to get control of the art building. Because this point is so far from your spawn, make sure you move as a team to minimize single kill trades. Whether you're a solo player or a 4-man squad, I hope you found this video helpful. I am working very hard every day to grow this channel, so please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Finally, let me know in the comments what you thought about the video and what type of video you would like to see next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.